Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is February 27th, 2022. The main thing I really felt compelled intuitively to come on here today and talk about is something I've been aware of for years, and some of my listeners may be aware of this, probably. Some may not. But as I was thinking about this last night I was thinking like, oh my God, this sort of feels like the end times. And then this morning we find out that Putin has put his nuclear defensive arms on high alert, which is just insane. You know, he's a madman. Like a lot of people, I felt really ill for a few days before they invaded. And how is it possible that a single madman can hold the whole world hostage like this? It's just, how is that even possible that one person could have so much power? It's just obscene. And, you know, it could only happen because on some level it's part of our collective consciousness. It certainly doesn't jive with mine, but it has to with others. And I say we have to deal with this. This is like, something has to happen about this. It's beyond ridiculous. What I wanted to talk about is this whole notion of a timeline split. Now, there have been a number of books that have been very important to me in my lifetime, like Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, Autobiography of a Yogi. At different times, certain books have just kind of shown up in my life and stuck with me. They were sort of paradigm shifting for me personally. Now, one of those was a book by Dolores Cannon called The Convoluted Universe, Book 1, specifically Book 1. I found the other books in that series were less coherent, I think. This book was first given to me by someone I know who is an energy healer and a psychic, gifted. And he was guided to loan me this book. Dolores Cannon, The Convoluted Universe, Book 1. Of course, I accepted, and I started to read it. Now, reading this book was paradigm shifting for me because it connected a lot of dots that I just couldn't connect up until then. There were many times when I read that book where I literally, my jaw would drop, and I would say to myself, oh my God, I think I actually said that out loud quite a bit too, because they were like missing pieces of the puzzle. So what Dolores Cannon did was that she put people into a very, very deep hypnotic state. And when people were in that deep state, she was able to communicate with them, and they would communicate more from their higher self level or their soul level, or they would even sometimes channel other beings who are not in our quote unquote material reality. And a lot of the things that came through all of these thousands of people that she was able to connect with on this level over many years all sort of resonated and had similar themes. There were some people, of course, in particular, who were able to go into very deep states. What they described was that the universe is actually very multidimensional. Oh, wait a minute. I should actually state that all of this right now is coming from memory. My library is like 800 miles away from me right now. And because of COVID, I'm not I'm not going there. So if you want to, I would suggest you actually buy the book, read it for yourself. There's tons of excerpts and stuff on YouTube and elsewhere, but they're not the same thing. Because, of course, they will only take little segments that they find interesting and put them forward, and sometimes they're slightly out of context. So I would actually suggest if you're seriously interested in this, you should read the whole book for yourself. Like it really kind of irks me sometimes when people just quote things without providing all of the context that is due. Now, one of the things that came out through her work, and she published many books, what these people were saying, not her, she's just writing this down, recording it. is that the universe is extremely multidimensional. Like there are parallel universes and parallel realities, and that periodically there are timeline splits where there can be two, for example, there could be two Earths that are in existence at the same time where slightly different things are happening. And then over time, the differences become greater and greater and greater. And the split will basically cause a divergence of these two realities or timelines. So there could be another version of you in another alternate or parallel universe that is married somebody different or made some decision at a certain point in life, and your whole life ends up being different in that reality. And that on a higher level, from a soul level, our soul is aware of all of these different realities because it has the ability to perceive and understand this. It's beyond the capability of the human mind to fully comprehend this because there are literally infinite numbers of parallel universes and realities. And this is why she gave the example, I believe, of something like, you drive by a house one day and you go like, I could swear that house was white and now it's blue or whatever, as an example. Because there can be junctures in time where sometimes we can sort of flip back and forth between different timelines. And she used that as an example to explain how sometimes people experience these kinds of things. It's not apparently extremely common, but it can occur. Now, the other thing that came out in a lot of her work, and this is a huge subject because her bibliography is enormous, but of importance to you and to me and to the people listening to this, I presume, is that when we started messing around with atomic bombs, the universe took note because those kinds of reactions have implications that go way beyond just planet Earth, that they can actually alter sort of the continuum of time and space beyond Earth itself. And at that point, it becomes a matter of concern to the other intelligent life forms in the universe. Boy, I'm getting strong chills here. Who, at that point, have no choice but to sort of intervene if things are going to get out of hand that go beyond the boundaries of Earth. Earth is a free will zone, but there's a limit to how much free will. They're not going to allow us to destroy the universe. In fact, she was quite adamant that they would never allow us to create some kind of nuclear Armageddon or something like that. That was a hard line we could not cross. And maybe that's why I was intuitively prompted to record this. So at that point, there was a call put out to souls, recognizing that Earth to some degree needed to have an intervention. And there was a call put out to souls who would volunteer to incarnate here to help lift up the consciousness and the vibration of planet Earth, because we were going down a very dangerous path. And when we incarnate, all of our memories and whatever awareness we have is wiped clean, because it would be extremely challenging to exist in the third dimension and have all of this awareness of our other lifetimes and other realities simultaneously. We would kind of be a mess, and it would defeat the purpose of incarnation, because it would be like knowing the answers to a test before you take the test. It would defeat the purpose of incarnation, in other words. And I have had experiences personally that confirm that, where I have had awareness that I do not normally have, and that was very difficult for me to maintain. And Earth is one of the darkest places in the universe in the sense that it has a very low vibrational energy. We are not very highly evolved. We have violence and war and the kind of crap we're dealing with now. This is really low vibrational stuff. There's a lot of pain and suffering and things that occur here that are quite extreme. Now, for souls who incarnate here, you can learn and grow tremendously in an incarnation because this experience is so intense, but it's extremely challenging. And a lot of souls run the risk of getting caught on the wheel of karma if they come here. And the law of karma is very strict in that if you commit acts that you have karma for, you have to repay or undo that karma. And that brings you into a cycle of reincarnating over and over and over again. And you can basically lose your way and you could get stuck here for thousands of lifetimes, even if you originally were a highly evolved being. So there are many of us who came, and she described 3 waves of volunteers. And the first would have been the generation that sort of came to prominence in the 1960s, born in the 50s and so forth, after the atomic weapons were used. So a lot of the beings that came to Earth and incarnated here came here to help uplift Earth, but they're not actually from Earth. They might have been much more highly evolved spiritual beings who volunteered to come here to help, and also knowing that they were running a great risk of getting caught on the wheel of karma. And those would be things like so-called wanderers and starseeds and things like that. Having a certain degree of spiritual awareness or consciousness is one of the primary indicators of that, although it's not exclusive, it's quite common. So she also described her work described a period of time which she believed was going to start occurring in the early part of the 2020s, where Earth would be going through this very significant timeline shift, and it would split into parallel realities. There was going to be one of those was going to be on a higher dimension of consciousness, and the other was going to be on a lower dimension of consciousness. And basically, on the lower side of the equation, that reality would kind of carry on the way that it had been all along, which is, war and greed and hate and, starvation and all the kind of crap that we're familiar with. Whereas on the higher dimension, the Earth would go on to experience this period of enlightenment, of much higher vibration. And that what differentiated whether a person went into the higher timeline or the lower timeline depended on their state of consciousness. So those who had not sufficiently evolved and moved away from a fear-based paradigm, a fear-based, very materialistic kind of paradigm, and those who have not cleared or resolved a lot of karma, which is why a lot of people are having intensely karmic incarnations right now. If you have had a lot of intense karmic relationships, that might be you. They would have to continue on incarnating in planets that resembled the Earth that we're familiar with for thousands and thousands of years. I've heard as many as 72,000 years from other sources before there would be another opportunity for the Earth to make a similar leap forward, at which time the qualified would carry on and those who weren't qualified wouldn't. Generally, it's younger souls who are not as evolved and are still at the earlier stages of spiritual evolution. She also made it clear that there were numerous other times in the history of Earth, in other civilizations, where humanity had come close to making this timeline shift into a higher dimension, but had failed. One of those was, like, for example, Atlantis, which destroyed itself. And that this time, it was basically guaranteed that this was going to occur for the first time in Earth's history, that there was a serious commitment and that there was enough people, a critical mass, in order to virtually ensure that this would occur, this timeline split. Part of what we're witnessing with this incredible levels of polarization and so forth in the world these days is a manifestation of that. On one level, the Earth's vibration is increasing significantly, and for those on a lower level vibrationally, these energies don't mix well, and they're finding this whole experience very disturbing and unsettling. And it's very uncomfortable to them. It's kind of like if you shine the light on the darkness freaks out. I've had that experience directly in many, many ways. The darkness does not like the light. It makes them feel very self-aware and self-conscious in a way that is upsetting. And those of us who are more sort of spiritually evolved or conscious are observing what's going on in astonishment, because this light that's coming into the planet is literally causing this reactionary response from all of these dark elements within society. We see it with, white supremacism and fascism and all of these movements to try and contain and control, banning books and lies, like lies. Lies are dark. I mean, it's one thing to spin things and to kind of misrepresent them, but to blatantly tell lies that you know are lies, that's evil. If you want a simple way of determining who's good and who's bad, the people who lie deliberately and try and manipulate and mislead people, and especially in ways they know that would be harmful to them, that's effing evil. There's no other way about it. It's black and white. Let's just be clear about that. She sort of insinuated, if I recall correctly, that this period of this timeline split would occur over a number of years. It didn't sound like decades. It sounded more like, I got the impression it was like 3 to 5 years or so. But one critical thing she said is that there would come a time in this split. In the early stages of the split, people could kind of flip back and forth between the two timelines because they hadn't diverged very much. But that the more these timelines diverged, that there would come a time where it would no longer be possible to go from timeline A to B, that it would be fully committed. And I had the impression that it was going to be, like I said, over the span of 5 or 6 years or something like that. And then you're baked in, like you're committed, you're fully committed to either the higher path or the lower path. And some people have said, not her, not Dolores Cannon, other people have said that what's going to happen is that the people in the lower timeline will just not be able to reincarnate here. They'll have to reincarnate somewhere else after they pass away. That's not exactly how Dolores Cannon described it. She made it seem like there was a literal timeline split. If you're on the higher timeline, what happens to all the people in the lower timeline? I don't really know. And vice versa, I don't know. But one of the interesting things about all of this is that it's beyond question. The levels of polarization are just astonishing in recent years, and increasingly so. Now, maybe this is also connected to Pluto moving into Aquarius, which I talked about, which is coming up like really soon, like in 2023, 2024. To me, that energy of Aquarius aligns very much with this age of Aquarius, the prophesized age of Aquarius. And I'm expressing all this, like I said, many of you may already be aware of it. Some of you may not. This whole thing that's going on, like with Ukraine, and even it started kind of even more with the convoy thing in Canada, which was really disturbing to me, just jaw-dropping. That kind of stuff just is so foreign to me and to my being that I can't even kind of grok it, to use a science fiction term. I just can't wrap my head around it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like this whole thing with Putin and everything. Like I said, how is that even possible? And so it seems like that timeline of the stuff from the past, the wars and the fighting and the geopolitics and everything being about profit and pride and ego, and it seems like that stuff is just becoming incredibly extreme. And I would imagine that my listeners are like me, find that incredibly repulsive. Just strong chills. Very disturbing. It's just alien to us. And if we are, say, for example, a wanderer, if we volunteered to come here from elsewhere, this whole reality, this whole paradigm of Earth is extremely foreign to us. It doesn't make sense. In fact, I had many experiences, even as a young child, and I'm talking probably 5 years old, is when I started to become aware of how foreign all of this felt to me, and strange and disturbing. And I literally, even at an extremely young age, I was always asking myself, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I had that awareness I had dreams and dreams, recurring dreams and dreams and dreams my whole childhood about this. How I didn't belong here. Why am I here? And some of you may feel the same way. I wanted to bring up the thing about the timeline split because we may be witnessing this now. Like I said, what is the cutoff point and how does that fully materialize? I don't, to my knowledge, that at least from Dolores Cannon's perspective, and she passed away years ago, right? So her work was done years and years ago, before there was everybody talking about this stuff on YouTube. Like, she was way ahead of the curve on this stuff. And because that book resonated so much with me, I give it a fair amount of consideration, more so than other sources, basically. Her body of work is huge. She initially started out being interested in UFO stuff, which I don't really care too much about. Like, I just take it for granted that there's intelligent life out there. But then as more and more stuff started coming out on a spiritual dimension, talking about multidimensional reality and reincarnation and things like that, that stuff to me was much more interesting. Actually, I think there's even an audio book of the Convoluted Universe, Book 1, for those who are really busy but might have time to listen to it. Can't recommend it enough. Now, it was years ago that I read this, but I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration. Somehow I feel like maybe it's helpful or useful to people, because when we look at what's happening in the world right now, it's extremely disturbing. And I don't think it's over. I think it's going to get worse. And again, yeah, I think it's related to the USA Pluto return. Boy, who's responsible really for this? I mean, in my video about Ukraine, I said it's not, the world allowed Putin to be in this position. We enabled him to be able to do things like this. So we're all kind of collectively responsible for this. But the events of the past few days have literally changed the world, at least as far ahead into the future as we can imagine. So this is big stuff, like incredible. And like I said, the timing with the USA Pluto return is just mind-blowing. So there you go. I really welcome your feedback, and I love, I get a lot of great comments, and I really appreciate that. An enlightened teacher of mine once said that some of the most advanced people on the planet were living on the streets. So please don't automatically discount anyone. Oh, by the way, I just started my Twitter handle, getting that active. That's Aquarian_diary. And I also sometimes post articles that are connected to some of my episodes. So I will, when I come across interesting articles that really connect to some of the episodes I've produced, I will put them in the comments beneath the video until I get my community tab activated anyway. I hope this is helpful somehow to you, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.